Well, like I already said, good morning. I am grateful to be here. I always like to start off before I speak just by saying, just by honoring Pastor Mark and Sarah. They truly are great leaders, and they are people who are who they are, and they're not any different than what you guys see, and so that is not always the case. And so I just wanted to honor them this morning and give them the honor that they're deserving of this morning. And so I'm going to jump right into my message. If you're a title person, my title is exactly what the screen says, Holy Disruption. Everybody say Holy Disruption. Wow, you guys are way better than the teenagers at that. Let me tell you, all right? The teens, I have to tell them like 3 times. I'm like, let's say it again, all right? Then they're like, all right, come on. So we're going to be talking about holy disruption. And so I just want to start off the morning by just asking you a question. How many of you love being interrupted? Yeah, that's about the response I expected, all right? I would say, and more importantly, my wife would probably say that I'm an expert interrupter, okay? That's not a good title to have, just in case you were wondering. I have a million thoughts running through my head, and I just want to tell you them before you're done talking to me, okay? My wife knows firsthand, all right? Sometimes she's like, my favorite line, she always says, "Are you going to let me speak?" I'm like, well, haven't you? I'm like, but I would say I'm an expert interrupter, and that's not a good title, like I said. I just am thinking about a lot of other stuff in advance. And so maybe for some of you in your lives, maybe if someone interrupts you when you start talking, sorry if it's me, I'll just apologize in advance. Maybe when you're about to fall asleep, your phone buzzes. I can guarantee you my life is not getting interrupted by a phone buzz past 9 p.m., all right? Do not disturb goes on. And even if I'm not in bed, I won't see it till the next morning, all right? That is a sure way to make sure that I do not get interrupted. Maybe for some of you, it's when you're in the middle of a game or watching a game and maybe watching Ohio State lose and you see someone say, oh, sorry. I'm a single IU fan in the midst of enemy territory right now. I'll pray for you later. Maybe for some of you, it's when you're watching the game and someone says, hey, can you help me with something, okay? And let's be real, that moment always happens when the best part of the game is happening. Like, you could catch me in the first quarter, the second quarter, the third quarter. When there's 2 minutes left on the clock in the game, that is not the time to say, hey, can you help me with something, all right? I'll do it anyways, all right, because I love my wife, but I'll do it not as happy as I would have in the first quarter. Maybe. So there's interruptions in our life, and let's be real, interruptions are annoying. Like, they are annoying, you don't like them, but they're annoying to us because they break our rhythm. They break what our expectations of how we thought something was going to go. So when there's 2 minutes left on the clock in the game, I am fully expecting I am going to sit here, not take any breaks until this game is done so I can find out the outcome. Now, I'll give myself I'll roast myself, okay, since I roasted all the Ohio State fans. Usually when I'm watching the Colts, I don't want to stay for the last 2 minutes because they're getting whooped, and I don't want to see the last 2 minutes of that. But we all hate interruptions in our lives. Maybe for some of you, an interruption could actually be the most important moment of your life. Maybe for some of you, a phone call that changes everything is actually a good thing. Maybe a conversation could redirect the course of your life. Maybe for some of you, a moment where someone might say exactly what you needed to hear is a moment that could change everything for you. You see, the best part about being married, and I know the men in the room are going to agree with me, the best part about being married is your wife is going to tell you what you need to hear, no matter if you like it or not. I got more amens from the wives than I did from the husbands, all right? And so someone that is good at that is obviously my wife. And sometimes I am not the best at receiving what she thinks I need to hear. But it doesn't take away the fact that I need to hear it. It doesn't take away the fact that maybe that what she needed to tell me I didn't want to hear, but I needed to hear it. And so sometimes interruptions in our lives could actually be turning points for us. And so today we're going to talk about Mark chapter 5. And if you don't know this story, we're going to go through it. But basically, Jesus shows up and interrupts an entire region. He interrupts darkness. He interrupts suffering. He interrupts bondage. But instead of celebrating the interruption, the people reject it. Maybe for some of you in the room, you can relate. Maybe you've been dealing with something that for so long, you've been dealing with it that it feels normal to you. It feels like everyday life. Maybe for others of you, you want to be free, but you fully recognize the bondage you're in. You just don't know how to get free. But maybe for others of you, there's people in the room that don't even realize you're in bondage and don't know how to get free from it. And so today, I believe that Jesus wants to offer you freedom over bondage. I believe that Jesus wants to step into your situation and interrupt it for his purpose. And so today I want to give you 3 keys to finding freedom over bondage in your life, all right? You guys ready for this? Well, maybe I should ask you that after the message. All right, here's the first point. Identify the bondage you've learned to live with. Identify the bondage you've learned to live with. The first step to freedom is identifying it, identifying the problem. And so, if you're going to take a step towards freedom, it's going to require you to identify the bondage that you've learned to live with. Mark chapter 5, verses 1 through 5 say this. They went across the lake to the region of Gerasenes. I probably butchered that, okay? Just go with it. When Jesus got out of the boat, a man with an impure spirit came from the tombs to meet him. The man lived in the tombs, and no one can bind him anymore, not even with a chain. For he had often been chained hand and foot, but he tore the chains apart and broke the irons on his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and in the hills, he would cry out and cut himself with stones. You see, the man in this passage lived among the tombs, and this just wasn't a bad day in his life. Like, this wasn't a momentary bad day. This had become a lifestyle for the man in this passage. And the passage said he was controlled by an impure spirit. And to the people around him, his brokenness had lasted so long that it became normal to them too. So it was normal to the man, and it was normal to them. You see, his bondage had become familiar. His bondage was familiar to him. And so, when I think about this, when I think about familiar stuff, I think about scents in houses, right? Everybody has a scent in their house. Some good, some bad, and you just want to leave. My wife makes sure that people want to stay at our house, okay? She is like the person that, so we have 2 dogs, if you didn't know. I love them, and I don't like them. It's a mixture. If you have a corgi, you know, all right? Their bark is piercing, okay? But Sierra always makes sure that the house smells good when people are coming over. But specifically when her mom stays at our house, she always asks her mom, as soon as she walks in the door, does our house smell like dog? 1, she knows her mom will be honest and tell her if it did. But 2, she wants to make sure that what we're smelling is what other people smell. Because we live in our house all the time. So our scent is familiar. And it's just like this in our bondages that we're bound by in our life. If we're in our bondage for too long, we start to not recognize the bondage as bondage. We start to make it familiar. We start to think it's a familiar part of our lives. I think if some of us were honest in the room, we've been bound by some familiar bondages. You see, familiar bondage is these 3 things. It's something that repeats long enough to feel permanent. It's something that hurts long enough, you stopped expecting healing. And it's something that controls you long enough, it starts to be who you are. And so some of us have been bound by things for so long, we've accepted it as normal. We've given up hope for healing. And for some of us, we've been bound by things for so long, we don't even realize we're trapped anymore. I looked up examples this week of things that, if they're trapped long enough, don't realize that they're trapped. And it may be no surprise to you, but if a zoo animal is kept in captivity long enough, the zookeepers can literally open up the gate and they will not leave. Because they're bound. And they've lived in a bound mindset for so long that when freedom happens, they don't even recognize it as freedom. It becomes an everyday habit for them to be bound. And for some of us, we've been trapped in familiar bondage for so long that when the door gets open to freedom, we can't recognize it as freedom. We recognize it as disruption to our normal life. Can I give you hope this morning that your familiar bondage doesn't have to be familiar anymore? That Jesus can free you, and in fact, Jesus wants to free you? The last time I checked, Jesus is still in the business of breaking chains that have kept people bound. But before Jesus can free you, you have to recognize what's been holding you. Before Jesus frees you, you have to recognize what's been holding you. If you want freedom from what's been keeping you bound, you have to recognize what's been keeping you bound. And so I have a couple questions for you this morning to start it off. What struggle have you started calling just who I am? That's just who I am. I've been addicted so long, that's just who I am. I've been sinning so long, that's just who I am. I've been in debt so long, that's just my reality. Your reality doesn't have to be your reality when Jesus steps in the room. Maybe for some of you, maybe for others of you, it's anxiety that you learn to live with. Oh, I'm just anxious. That's just who I am. I'm just an anxious person. Maybe for some of you, it's a secret sin you've normalized. Like, God, I've given you everything, but I still want to keep this one thing. Maybe for some of you, it's anger or bitterness you justify. Maybe for some of you, it's you don't know what happened. You don't know why I'm so angry at them. You don't know the situation. You weren't there. Maybe for others of you, it's financial bondage that you justify by saying everyone overspends. And maybe for others of you, it's labels that have become your identity. Can I ask you a question? Who gave them the power to determine who you are? Because the last time I checked, I'm a child of God. And if I'm a child of God, nobody can tell me who I am other than my Creator. If we're going to experience freedom, it's going to require us to acknowledge it. Maybe for some of you, you've heard a little bit of my struggle with anxiety, but if you don't, basically, I lived with anxiety my whole life, said it was fear, and I didn't know how to tell someone that I was anxious, and I didn't know how to get around it. And I just thought, I just overthink all this stuff, and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Well, long story short, I lived with anxiety for as long as I can remember, and I always refused to admit what it was. I always refused to call it that. I always refused to name it. But I found that there was freedom in naming it. I remember one time I was so anxious, I didn't know what to do, and Sierra looked at me and she was like, you know you are anxious right now. And I'm like, no, I'm not. She's like, yes, you are. And I'm like, I am anxious. But saying that provided so much freedom because when I could admit it, I had steps to take to defeat it. But whenever I didn't admit it, you can't defeat what you refuse to admit. And so if you're gonna experience freedom, it's gonna require you to acknowledge it because the opposite is if you don't acknowledge what you're bound by, you can't experience freedom from it. Here's the next point. Allow Jesus to disrupt what is controlling you. Allow Jesus to disrupt what is controlling you. Mark 5, 6 through 13 says this. When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and fell on his knees in front of him. He shouted at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In God's name, don't torture me." For Jesus had said to him, "Come out of this man, you impure spirit." Then Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" "My name is Legion," he replied, "for we are many." And he begged Jesus again and again not to send them out of the area. A large herd of pigs was feeding on the nearby hillside, and the demons begged Jesus, "Send us among the pigs. Allow us to go into them." He gave them permission, and the impure spirits came out and went into the pigs. The herd, about 2,000 in number, rushed down from the steep bank into the lake and were drowned. One of the things that sticks out to me in this passage is that Jesus didn't negotiate with darkness. He confronted it. He wasn't like, "Oh, well, let's see what we can figure out here, all right? How about I'll let 5 of you stay, okay? The other ones, you got to go." No, he didn't negotiate with it. He was confronted it right off the bat. He didn't try to avoid it. He didn't try to ignore it. He confronted it. Because freedom always starts with a disruption. Freedom started with a disruption. Someone had to call out in that man call out of that man what was in him. Someone had to call out the impure spirits out of him. You see, Jesus disrupted what was normal to that man. It was normal for him to be bound. It was normal for the people to just see him bound. But it wasn't normal to Jesus. The things we're bound by might be normal to us, but it's not normal to Jesus. He doesn't want us to stay there. You see, Jesus didn't want that man bound anymore, but in order for freedom to happen, there had to be a disruption of the norm. And it's the same in our lives. If we're going to live in freedom, there has to be some things that get disrupted. Things like habits, things like relationships, things like priorities. We've all heard the line, "Get your priorities straight," right? Maybe for some of you, it's your thinking. Have you guys ever heard the saying, "Stinking thinking"? It's true. If you're constantly telling yourself lies, you are eventually going to start living the lie you tell yourself. Maybe for some of you, it's your excuses. Maybe for some of you, your excuse is, "Well, this is just how my family's always been. This is what my family's always dealt with. This is who we've always been." Have you ever heard the saying, "It's ran in my family till it ran into me"? And if you haven't, what would it look like to live a life that said, "It ran in my family till it ran into me"? We need to get rid of the excuses. The disruptions we experience may be uncomfortable, but last time I checked, so was being bound. So was being bound. How many of you have ever seen the show Fear Factor? Where fear is not a factor. Okay. Right? Fear Factor. Last time I watched that show, nobody was smiling and happy if they had to be bound. Right? I watched this episode, and these people were strapped in to this thing that was getting lifted into water. Here's the problem. When they got dunked, they had no idea how long it was going to take them to get out of the water. So whenever they got dunked, there was no one saying, like, in 10 seconds, you're going to get pulled out of the water. When I was watching that, nobody that was trapped was saying, "Wow, this is the greatest day of my life." They were all saying, "Wow, is that money really worth it?" Because being bound isn't comfortable. And for some of you in the room, you haven't experienced freedom because it would be a disruption to what you're used to. But what if that disruption was actually deliverance? Because here's one thing I know. Disruption what often feels like a disruption is often deliverance. What often feels like disruption is normally a deliverance. The things that we don't want to give up could be the very things that could lead to freedom. Are they comfortable? No. Is it always comfortable to stop habits that you've been doing your whole life? No. Is it comfortable to have to stand in front of people and say, this is what I've been struggling with, and I didn't know how to get freedom? No. Is it comfortable to be accountable to people? No. But all of those things lead to freedom. Freedom often requires letting Jesus change things in your life. Let me ask you this question this morning. What is Jesus trying to change in your life? And then the second part of that question, what conviction have you been ignoring? You ever get that check in your spirit and still do it anyways? I can guarantee you that was probably the Holy Spirit. Because last time I checked, anytime I'm doing something that I should be, I don't have a check in my spirit about it. I don't have a check in my spirit about whether or not I should go golfing, okay? Let me give you that. I'm like, yeah, it's always a good time. Jesus wants to offer you freedom today, but you can't ask for freedom while refusing to change. God, I want freedom. I just don't want to do anything different. And God's like, well, you're not giving me a whole lot to work with right there. I want all of the benefits of that freedom brings. I just want to stay in all of the traps that I'm in. If you're going to truly experience freedom, it's going to require disruption. In fact, I would call it a holy disruption. It's going to require you to fully surrender everything to Jesus. It's going to require you to be vulnerable. And it's going to require you to be honest and open with people. Jesus can't heal what you keep protecting. I talked about how I struggled with anxiety. And you want to know one of the most uncomfortable things I had to ever do? Sit across from someone that is just analyzing your every word, aka a counselor. You think that was comfortable to me? No. I was sitting there like, you want me to tell you everything? But you know what? That disruption to my normal routine, you can ask Sierra. I was a person that was like, I will never see a counselor. I don't need that. Until I went and I needed it. And I realized that there's brain patterns and things that from my past that have shaped my thinking. That was the best thing I could have ever done. It led to freedom. Do I still struggle with anxiety sometimes? Absolutely. But I have the tools to overcome it. It's going to require vulnerability if you want to be free. It's time to let disruption in so freedom can be experienced in your life this morning. If you're taking notes, write this last point down. Choose freedom over what feels familiar. Choose freedom over what feels familiar. Mark 5:14-20 says this. Those tending the pigs ran off and reported this in the town and countryside. And the people went to see what happened. When they came to Jesus, they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons sitting there and dressed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. Those who had seen it told the people that what had happened to the demon-possessed man and told about the pigs as well. Then the people began to plead with Jesus to leave their region. As Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed and begged to go with him. Jesus did not let him, but said, "Go home to your own people and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you." So the man went away and began to tell in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and all the people were amazed. Instead of celebrating freedom, the people asked Jesus to leave. Why? Because freedom disrupted their comfort. It cost them to lose something. Can I tell you this morning that freedom will cost you something? For some of us, we are exactly like the people. Instead of celebrating freedom, we'd rather keep family dysfunction. We'd rather keep predictable brokenness. We'd rather keep comfortable sin. We'd rather keep financial bondage, aka debt. Why? Because we have shaped who we are to be, to live with all these things that are actually bondages. And what would a life look like if you stopped living with the bondage and started living with peace that only Jesus can bring? Your bondage doesn't have to be your forever. But for some of us, we'd rather keep what's comfortable than embracing real freedom. I have two people in my life that are living testimonies of what it looks like to live a life that says, my family may have been blank, but I'm going to live for Christ. Those people are my dad and my wife. Both of them had upbringings that were not in the church, that this is not their normal life, and could have very well had the excuses of saying, that's how my family has always been, so that's who I'm going to be, but chose not to. But chose to say, God, I don't want to live like I've been living. I don't want these bondages to keep happening in my family. I want to be the one to break it. And because of that, because my dad said yes to Jesus, I am the second generation pastor in our family with a family of no pastors. And my sister's in ministry school. So then there's 3 generations of pastors. All because someone said yes. And because my wife said yes, she is going to raise her kids in a household that loves Jesus and is always going to point them, and with parents who are always going to point them back to them. All because of a yes. And all because of a, I'm tired of this bondage. I want freedom. You see, the healed man in this passage experienced freedom because he was willing to leave familiar bondage to embrace holy disruption. His bondage became his testimony. Freedom is going to require you to leave behind what is familiar. You can't act the same and expect to live differently. When Jesus disrupts your life, you have to decide this. You have to decide, am I going to return to what's familiar, or am I going to step into freedom? Returning to what's familiar is always an option. It's not the best option, but it's an option. You ever seen those things like option A, option B? Well, that would be like option not even on the list, all right? But you could go back to what's familiar, or you could say, you know what, I'm going to step into the freedom that Christ offers. And that's option A. But if you're going to live a life that real freedom requires, it's going to require you to live a life of surrender. It's going to require you to live a life of honesty. And it's going to require you to live a life that says, I trust in Jesus no matter what. It's going to require full surrender to him. You see, freedom starts when you stop running back to what Jesus already freed you from. Freedom starts when you stop running back to what you've already been freed from. Like I said, like I gave an example, do I get anxious? Yes. But does it crumble me? No. Because I've already overcome it by the help of Jesus. And if Jesus has helped me overcome it, then shouldn't that be enough to keep on overcoming it? His grace is enough. And so as we close this morning, I want you to think about the man in Mark 5. For years, he lived in bondage. He was isolated. He was hurting. He was completely controlled by something he couldn't break on his own. And everyone around him had gotten used to it. They had accepted that this was just his life. But the moment Jesus stepped onto the shore, everything changed. And in one moment, Jesus did what no chain, no person, no effort could ever do. He broke the bondage. The man who used to live in tombs was now sitting clothed and in his right mind. And I believe the same Jesus that broke the bondage in that story is willing to break your bondage today. Some of you have been living with things that have started to feel normal. Maybe it's anxiety, maybe it's shame, maybe it's a sin you've been hiding, maybe it's lies you've believed about yourself. But what has felt normal to you might actually be a bondage in your life. And Jesus didn't come to help manage your bondage. He came to help break it. But remember, everyone in this story had a response. My old pastor used to say, your response is your responsibility. The townspeople saw the freedom, and what'd they do? They told Jesus to leave. They chose familiar bondage over holy disruption. But the man who was healed chose something different. He embraced the freedom that Jesus gave him. And so as we stand this morning, you have that same decision. Will you hold on to what's familiar? Or will you let Jesus bring disruption into your life? So right now, I want to give you the opportunity to respond. If there's something in your life that you've been holding on in bondage, something you've been carrying, I want you to come and give it to Jesus. And so while they play another song, I want to encourage you. Maybe it's at your seat, but maybe it's at the altar. There's not going to be altar workers, but it's going to be just you and him. Maybe it's just sitting. No matter how it looks, I just want to encourage you this morning. Give the bondage to him, and I promise you that freedom will be the result of it. Let's give our bondage to him this morning. We've been trying to do it on our own for too long. If you've been trying to do it on your own, why not give it to God and see what he can do with it? And let's start living lives of freedom in Christ this morning.